We will be recording today's webinar as we do for all our monthly Asta Power Projects webinars. So if perhaps you've got some colleagues that weren't able to attend today, certainly when you attend, there's a couple of great benefits. All those that do attend will receive a link to a free download copy, trial copy of the software, fully functional, includes all the functionality we'll be talking about today and clearly a great deal more. But in addition to that, you'll certainly be able to interact a bit. While in this webinar, we found it most practical to keep everyone muted, you certainly can submit questions anytime you want. We generally get quite a few. We don't always get to all of them. Today's session will be around 50 to 55 minutes. That's about the time that we try to target. We'll try to keep it certainly with a little bit less than that hour time frame. If that means we don't get to everyone's questions, then we'll follow up with you by email and get your answers out to you right away. And all our contact information will be provided during the webinar as well, if you'd rather just pick up the phone and give us a call. But and we try to, as I said, we try to keep it to just under an hour. We know everyone's busy, and top of the hour, people have meetings. So we try to be cognizant of that and be sensitive to the fact that you've got to move on to your next meeting. So with that, let's jump right in. Today's topic is a topic I have to tell you that we've had many people come to us and pose the very question that we'll be answering today. Today, the topic is the top 10 reasons to switch from Primavera P6 to Asta Powerproject. Megan and I were just at the AACE meeting in Toronto, and we had terrific attendance. We had folks coming by the booth, and this is the kind of question that people ask all the time. Give me your top 5, your top 3. Give me the reasons why I should not use a market share leader. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So today, your presenters are myself. I'm Jim Dawkins. I'm the U.S. Channel Manager for Alicosoft. Alicosoft is the provider of the Asta Power Project, the producer of the Asta Power Project software. Megan DePody leads our consulting group here in the U.S. and provides additional technical support and training consulting assistance for our solution providers, our reseller partners that are local to you and all across the United States. We'll talk more about that here in just a second. So one of the first questions, particularly for those of you that maybe have not heard of Asta Power Project, we like to, our inside joke is it's the best kept secret in construction scheduling in the U.S. And we'll talk a little bit about why that may be the case. But there's a lot of very significant, well-respected contractors, both in the U.S. and globally, that use Asta Power Project. Folks, that it might surprise you a bit that take advantage of the functionality within Asta Power Project. For folks that haven't heard of a tool like Asta Power Project, sometimes it's easy to kind of make some assumptions about who might be using this lesser known brand. And I think you'd be surprised. Now, a lot of folks like to throw a lot of big logos on a screen and talk about how big companies are using it. That provides you with some level of security. And certainly the ability to meet the needs of some very large contractors is important. You can't scale. You don't feel as if perhaps that it has the sophisticated features and the ability to meet those complex project needs that perhaps you have. But I have to tell you that where the rubber meets the road is where we meet the needs of medium-sized contractors, the folks who are doing a great deal of the building here in the U.S. and are very busy. And there's some rather specific needs that I think we'll talk about. So before we do that, let me tell you just a little bit about Alicosoft. As I said, Alicosoft is the company behind the software. It's important to know just a tad a bit about them. You need to know that they're there for you and have been well funded and doing this for a while. May surprise you to know that Asta Powerproject has been around for decades, almost as long as Primavera. You may also be surprised to know that it's by far the dominant market share leader in the UK. So while we're building our acceptance here in the US, in the UK, that acceptance is already there. Everyone's heard of it and is using it on very large construction projects. Got over almost 1,400 users in the US, growing fast. It's hard for me to kind of keep this slide updated as we grow and add new users and new customers every month. Worldwide, we have over 75,000 users. We've got the software is translated into 7 languages, including UK and US, which are countries separated by a common language. We've got in use in 90 countries around the globe. I think what differentiates Alicosoft from many of the other software providers that you're working with is that we're right-sized and we can listen to your input and actually make changes to the software based on input you provide. It's that interaction, it's that ability to listen and modify and improve the software that gives us probably our greatest strength. And then we can deliver it and roll it out through local resellers, local solution providers. And we're very careful about the folks that represent Asta Powerproject. They must have excellent scheduling expertise. They must have the ability to train you on the tool and provide consulting assistance during your projects, technical assistance. So you can be assured that the folks that are delivering the software local to you have those abilities. So today's topic is brought about by a set of challenges that people face every day and think there is no adequate solution to. And the very first is we are not getting the adoption with construction scheduling that we'd like to see. There are companies that are contractually obligated to create a schedule, but the schedule is not adequately progressed, is not updated in a way that's appropriate, and perhaps even the initial creation may have been somewhat challenging. And part of that's because owners and agencies may specify to you a specific output that you must deliver to them. And that output may be something like P6. And if you haven't been using P6, there's a rather steep learning curve. And people have asked us over and over again, well, why is this so complicated? Yeah, maybe I have a undergraduate in construction management, but honestly, how much time do they spend on scheduling? It's a science unto itself. It can be a science unto itself. So why does it have to be so complicated? And on top of that, it's incredibly expensive. Part of that's owing to the way the software is most likely licensed, but you got to spend several $1,000s to put it on your desktop. Well, I'm not using it all the time. Why would I spend that kind of money for such a complicated tool when I'm not going to be using it all the time? I mean, and why is it no longer just designed for construction? To kind of call out the elephant in the room, Primavera has grown over the years for good reasons. Primavera for years and years and years has served the construction market quite well. They've grown to a market share leader for many good reasons. Those reasons change over time, just as is true for every software company, but it does depend on the focus. So if your tool seems to be better suited for manufacturing or technology projects or oil and gas, some of those aspects are very typical, have requirements rather that are specific to construction as well. But some of them are not. And if you see features or improvements that don't seem to be anywhere near your need set, that suggests the tool that you're licensing is no longer focused on your types of businesses. So why is the learning curve so steep? And I alluded to this before. Why is it so complicated? And there are a lot of reasons why software can be complicated. All of us have been using it for most of our career. So that's really a larger question. But if you find that the folks that are casual users must be trained and retrained, then you have to ask yourself if it's targeted at the way you're using the software. If it's complicated enough that you need to dedicate a full-time employee or hire a consultant to do it, those are expenses that you may not be in a position to afford. And is it really just targeted at enterprise-wide use? It would be nice if you had a tool that was easy to deploy on a standalone basis. And honestly, most tools out there can be deployed on a standalone basis as well. But if the direction, if the push, if the strong desire is to deploy it only in an enterprise method, and that's not appropriate for you, and for some it is, then you have to ask yourself, is my tool suited for me? So I think the quick answer to all of those is that you do have a choice. For some of you, you may not have been aware of this choice. And it's actually possible to find a construction-specific scheduling solution that is easy to use, that is also equally as easy to license. And I'll talk a little bit about this here real quickly, but the licensing mechanisms that used to be offered were designed around casual users, what I'm referring to as casual users. I'm not suggesting that their use is not sophisticated. What I'm suggesting is they don't use it all the time. Occasional users. You need a tool that is, while at the same time easy to use, is also robust enough to fit the requirements of some complex projects, and is a fully outfitted CPM tool. So all of your critical path requirements, pass both ways, are fully supported. You need a tool that can grow with me. Can I run a really quick small project? Can I schedule that quickly and easily, but also do full cost and resource loading and balance those resources? Yes, you can with Asta Powerproject. And probably the last most important question that we get asked all the time. That's great, guys. It's easier to use. Licensing is more affordable based on the way you license it. Grows with me. It's robust. But my owner is specifying something else. That's fine. So Asta Powerproject lives within your ecosystem. You can open Microsoft Project. You can open various versions of Primavera, P6, P3, SureTrack. You can save back to an XER file. You can save back to a Microsoft Project file. So if the owner is specifying, and we all live in a real world where there are market share leaders that we must recognize, if the owner specifies an XER file, you can save. It's not an export. It's just a file, save as. So if you're anticipating some big routine that needs to be run to open or export, it's simply not there. We have quite a few customers that are providing this very same XER format to customers who think they're using Primavera. The licensing is appropriate to the way you use it. You can buy a standalone license at a far more reasonable cost than you could for Primavera. You can put it right on your desktop. You can, if you're a full-time scheduler, this makes perfect sense. But you can also use our concurrent licensing model for those occasional users. We often see ratios of 3 or 4 to 1 for concurrent use. Just depends on what they're doing, and we can help you walk through that. But it becomes very cost effective when you are only paying for the use as you make use of it. So you buy one concurrent user can serve 3, maybe up to 4 people. Very straightforward and appropriate, probably more importantly. So what I've tried to do is kind of set the stage for the kind of challenges that a lot of people have come to us and suggested. What really differentiates functionally the tool we're using today, P6, from Asta Powerproject, and why are those reasons compelling enough for us to switch? And I think you'll see that that's absolutely the case. So let me pass my screen over to Megan.
Can you see my screen, Jim?
I can see your screen, and more importantly, I can hear you.
Even better. All right. Thanks, Jim. So as you mentioned, I'm going to kind of walk you through some of the ways in which Asta Powerproject is just as powerful as P6, but much easier to use. Some of the things that set us apart that are unique to Asta Powerproject that I think can be used and described as what makes Asta Powerproject a better scheduling tool. So I'm going to start just a blank schedule here and kind of walk through some of the initial scheduling process and highlight what some of these benefits and differentiators are. First thing that you'll see is it looks somewhat familiar. You open it up, the interface is, if you've used any Microsoft products, it's familiar to you. It's not scary, it's not intimidating. You know, we get a lot of people who say, you know, I'm a full-time scheduler, so I'm comfortable with whatever system I use, Primavera, whatever, but you know, I have all these other people in my company that I'm trying to get them to schedule and they just won't do it. Or, you know, we trained all our superintendents and project managers, but it's been a couple of years since they were trained, and now they can't remember how to do it, and we don't want to have to send everybody through 3 more days of training. Good thing, one of the good things that we hear a lot from our customers is that with Asta Powerproject, you can, with limited, minimal training, at least get started. And then as you want to get complex, you can get more training. But right off the bat, the intimidation factor for a lot of people is no longer an issue. A lot of people are used to having to make any and all changes, whatnot, within the spreadsheet, which can be a little cumbersome. For some people, it works great, and they're just kind of used to it. But for a lot of people, it's just not intuitive. It doesn't make sense to them. It's kind of clunky and cumbersome, add steps. So one of the kind of first things that people notice about Asta Powerproject is that it's very graphic. You can still do anything you want to within the spreadsheet and make those changes and import that data that way. But it's also useful for very visual people. So starting out, I can just click and drag to create tasks on my schedule. I have a box here that pops up, dialog box that will show me what dates, durations, etc. And as we move through, keep an eye on that box. It has a lot of info there, but I can just start off by drawing a few activities. So I can watch that box to check where my dates are. This is especially helpful for those, and I'm not saying anyone here does it, but you know, you probably know someone who wants to create their schedule in Excel and just mark off the days that they want to do stuff and that they say, this is my schedule. Well, that's nice, but as we know, you need some logic because things don't always go according to plan. So you can start out by taking that information from that Excel spreadsheet or the dates that they just typed up and decided were going to be our schedule, and you can draw out these activities. Then we need to add logic. If we're going to be a true CPM schedule, we have to have logic. You can do it a few ways. You can draw tasks. This cursor right here shows that it's going to be a finish activity, so either finish to start or finish. I could do finish to finish. So if I go to the beginning of a task there, that's start, so that's a finish to start activity. If we're in the middle here, you can see on that pop-up window there, my lead lag is changing. So I can say I want it to be a 3-day lag from this to the start of that, or again, there's a secondary lead lag going in if we want it to, and we can go in and make those changes. Fantastic thing that you'll see me utilizing quite a bit is you can undo through saves and through reschedules. So I have, and this is actually stuff I did earlier in the day when I was on there, but I can go back and undo through any of that. It has a list, so I know, okay, I want to get rid of my links, and maybe that last activity that I drew I want to get rid of. And then I think, nope, I wanted that other activity. You can put it back in. It doesn't matter if you've saved. It also doesn't matter if you've rescheduled, which is a big one that it comes in very handy for doing what-if scheduling, that I can make changes, hit reschedule, see what happens, and then say, oh, wait, there was some unintended consequences. Let's go back. Let's undo, try it again. So another way to create links, again, if you just have this kind of list of activities and dates you want to as a starting point for your schedule, you can highlight any and all activities. You can go to this linking, and there's an option for maintain task offsets. What that does is it will create logic links in the order, putting these activities in the order they are, maintaining any lead lags, gaps, etc. that you've got. So as you can see, it created links that will maintain those tasks. So if you're starting, like I said, with just some random activities and dates, you can use that as a starting point to create your schedule, and then you can go back and kind of review and say, oh, well, that one says it has a 3-day lag. Why would that be? Does that make sense? Is there any actual logic behind that 3 days, or was it just random? But it gives you a good starting point. Another thing we've got here, I'll open up the task here. You can also do your leads and lags as a percentage, because a lot of times you say, okay, I know that we're going to have the framer start, and a little bit behind them we're going to have in-wall rough-in going. And randomly say, oh, I think it's going to be about 3 days behind. Or you can say, you know what, our building's this big, we know how fast the framers go and how fast the plumbers or electricians or whoever go. So I think once the framers are, say, 75% done, then my rough-in can start without them catching up or overlapping each other. So you can do lags as a percentage as well. So that's very unique, something I think is much more user-friendly. We get a lot of people who say that that makes a lot more sense to them than just doing it by days. So that as your potentially change, you don't have to change your lags. You can say, okay, well, we thought this activity was going to be 2 weeks. Actually, it's going to end up being 3 weeks. But I don't have to go and change my lag from, if it was a halfway through kind of a lag that you had a 2-week activity with a 1-week lag, you wouldn't have to go change it and say, okay, well, now it's going to be a 7 or an 8-day lag. You can just say, I still want it to be a 50% lag, and 50% of the way through the predecessor activity is when my successor is going to start. Another thing we have is drag and drop capabilities. So this, you can assign resources, costs, codes. You're probably used to calling them activity codes. It's just codes. Here, calendars, any of this data can be assigned by simply dragging and dropping from this project view here over on the left-hand side. So if I want to assign subcontractors to these tasks, I can shift-click, I can control-click, I can do them one at a time and drag them. And visually, right now I have it set to show my subcontractor here, but you can set it to show any of your codes that you would like, as well as some other information, but you can have it if you have a code for maybe a building or for a level, an area. type of work. You can have those visually shown so that it helps when you're looking at a big schedule, helps things kind of pop out and differentiate activities. I can also, like I said, drag and drop. I can change my calendar. I can have separate calendars for any activity. If I've got an activity that's scheduled, it will ask you if you want to keep the dates or keep the duration when you're changing a calendar. But I can do that as unique as I want. So I can make any of my activities have whatever calendar I want, but I don't have to go in and scroll through kind of a cumbersome looking column or any properties boxes. I can just drag them over. Same with resources. I can assign resources as I want by simply dragging it over. And you can see again in that pop-up dialog box, it's saying that it's going to assign bricklayers to this activity. It shows my availability of that resource. If I show my resource there, it shows that I have assigned a bricklayer for those 3 weeks. You can set the defaults for when you assign something, if it's 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, how that resource is hours are calculated. Another function here of just the visual portion is, and you'll see me using these buttons here, these show hide buttons a lot. It's how I format my bar chart. I can make it look how I want. I can turn on baselines. I don't have any currently in this schedule. I can turn on show my relationships or not. This will show my float or not. I don't have any float in the schedule, but like I said, turning on my resources, turning on my costs. So it's a quick, easy way to, as I'm going through it, I just want to look real quick at what my resource was on it. I can turn it on, look, turn it back off so that I don't have to mug up my view and make it more complicated than I need to for something that I just want to check every now and then. So I'm going to get rid of this here and look at another way that you might want to create a schedule. A lot of times we'll get spreadsheets like this, whether it's from our estimate, from some contractor. We'll get a spreadsheet that has some work. Sometimes it'll have costs, might have hours. I can simply copy and paste that information. It will create activities. If I had dates in that column, it would copy those dates as well. So that is, like I said, just a real quick, easy way to get a lot of information. It really speeds up the data entry process. Data entry is a big time consumer in the world of scheduling, and this saves you a lot of time. So it frees up your time to spend more of it on really paying attention to your logic, to your resources, things like that, instead of just, whether it's copying one cell at a time or hand typing everything. It can get very time consuming. Again, if I want to, I can come here and I can just link my tasks. That'll just do a straight finish to start link. I can, again, draw the tasks, draw the links in individually. I can use my spreadsheet to do the tasks. So there are a lot of different ways that you can do the same things to adapt to how you're most comfortable working. Another thing we can do here, so I've got these activities. I want to take a look at my costs. So I'm going to open that up. And here I've got my activities, some of my different cost categories. I come back here. Again, I'm just going to copy and paste. And there they are. And back to my formatting, if I show my costs, it will show on a separate line here which cost categories those are in. So it not only puts the dollars in there, but it actually allocates specific cost categories to them. I can show either here or up here. I can turn on histograms if I've created them before. My histograms are also live data. So if I make changes to this schedule, my histogram is going to change to reflect those changes. So it's nice to be able to see what you're doing as you're doing, what the effects might be, whether it be on cost, on resources, on your manpower allocations. All of that's available to see as you make changes. Next thing I'm going to do here is show you one other way we can kind of quickly get the schedule creation done. Is Asta Powerproject has something called task pools, which are groups of activities. I'm going to click on them. They're not a part of my schedule. If I go back up here to my schedule hierarchy, nothing exists. But I can come here, and they are groups of activities that have logic. They can have codes, resources, costs, calendars, any of that information saved within them. And I can have them in a template so that when I go to create a schedule, I can just come to any of these and say, you know what, I'm going to start with these. So I'm going to use procurement and say substructure. And these are all part of my schedule now. So now if I come up here, you can see in my project hierarchy, I have these activities. Another thing that I have found a lot of people like, it cleans up their schedule, makes them easier to read, it makes it so that you're not sending a 50-page schedule out to everybody because people's eyes tend to glaze over when you've got that many pages, is multiple activities per line. And people see that, but they don't quite, it's hard to grasp. Why would you want it? What do you do? I particularly find it incredibly useful for procurement activities, because we know that best scheduling practices, we want to track the procurement, submittal process, manufacturing, delivery on our schedule. But it's a lot of individual activities to track, or you can, a lot of people end up just to make their schedule smaller, just do one, prepare and approve submittals, or, manufacture and deliver. But we know that delays can happen anywhere in that process, and we want to be able to track where our changes are happening. So by expanding that, you can see these are all individual tasks with their own logic. They can have their own resources, codes, anything else. So I've got, the entire submittal process here. So if things change, it will change throughout. It will show, any or all of these could be on the critical path. They are truly individual activities, but I can just roll them up so I can see the whole process on one line, rather so that when I print out my schedule and send it off, if we're looking specifically at the procurement, I can unroll it and send everybody that, and you can see what the status of those is. But if I'm really focused on my construction schedule, I can bring these up to one line so I can still see my progress, see where things are happening, but I don't necessarily have to have it be pages and pages and pages on my schedule. Another way these multiple tasks per line come in handy is when we have repeated activities. I'll roll this up here. So I'm going to create one, and we'll call it inspections. So, maybe we're building a high-rise that has a lot of repeated areas, and we know that we're going to have an inspector out here inspecting the rebar in our slabs every 3 days. So I can create a 1-day, a 5-day, 1-day activity there. I can click on this recurring task button here. I'll bring it up. I could also make them milestones. If I have a milestone, maybe it's a turnover dates, maybe it's cure dates, something that we just need to mark in there and recurs over and over again. Put it in here. I can make them whatever duration I want. This delay box here is how many days are between each of the activities and how many total activities they're going to be. So I'm going to have, say, 8 inspections. Say, okay, there are my 8 recurring tasks. Again, I can open it up and look at them individually. I can tie their own logic to that so that, while we're planning on them every 3 days, if a predecessor task is delayed, it would delay these. They are true activities with true logic. I can also highlight any and all of these. If I wanted to highlight some, I can highlight some, highlight them all here. I can click Unroll, and it will create them so that they are individual tasks on their own lines. They no longer roll up. So if you were creating a bunch of tasks that are the same, that are going to be happening over and over again, you can create it as a recurring task. So you do it once, and it creates 5 of them, 10 of them, 20 of them, however many. And then you can unroll it so that they're no longer on the same line. You can have them spread out throughout your schedule, but it just speeds up the activity creation process. Another thing I'm going to show you here is working in the spreadsheet. We've got our successor columns. A lot of times when you have your logic column, it's a lot of data to look at. And when you start getting a lot of links in here, these columns can get full. You know, if you don't want it to eat up a lot of space, then you start having your rows get wider. One unique thing that a lot of people, that we have a lot of users like about it, is in table definition here. You can not only edit what your specific columns are included, the titles, etc., and formatting for them, but you can also edit some of the details and what is shown within that column. So right now I'm showing my line number for my successors. I could show it by name. That gets even busier. I can show it by my task ID. I'm going to keep it at line here. This is showing all the details. So you can see I have my activity, the type of relationship, if there's a lag, what that lag is. I can also make it, I want to show just the details. If it's not, I finish or start with 0 lag activity. So that cleans it up quite a bit. I can say, okay, I know those successor activities there, and then I can see when it's not standard. I can also have no details. So it's just a straight, I don't necessarily know what type of relationship that is, but I can see where it's going. You can categorize your links, so if I have link categories, I can show those within that column as well. You can also have multiples. So I'm going to have a successor column there with, say, maybe all the details, and I'm going to have a successor column that has line number again with no details. So I can add that in and show and hide them as I want, but it gives you a lot of options for how you see info within columns. That it's not straight to, oh, if you have a successor column, it's always going to be the task ID and always going to be the details of the link. I can change that depending on what I want to look at, how, you know, what I'm using it for. Another benefit to Powerproject that we hear a lot about and we get a lot of positive comments on is the fact that whatever is showing on my screen is what's going to print. I can create print views that are saved and set that I can revert back to, but I don't have to. If I want to print this, it's as easy as going to File and Print. That's right there. I'm going to open up a full preview here. I can also, once I say, oh, I'm going to print, but I didn't really want to show my relationships. I have these same buttons that were on my Format tab before showing, so I can turn my relationships off. Maybe I want to turn my critical path on because I had forgotten to before. So I can show all of these things or hide without having to close my print preview, go back, make the changes, come back. It's all right here. Another thing we've got is when you install Asta Powerproject, you also get Asta PowerDraw, which you can use to create border files. So you are not restricted to, I have a header and a footer, I can have, you know, 1, 2, or 3 boxes and put some basic things in there. You truly have an almost unlimited amount of things you can do with that. So when you're setting to schedule, you can select your border file. There are some kind of default ones that come with it, but you can edit here. And these are all tied to your schedule. This here is just showing that that's where your chart is going to print. So I can make that smaller. I can say I only want my bar chart and spreadsheet to be here because I want it in this area, put maybe some statistics for my project or maybe a Google Earth view of the site, or histograms or S-curves. I can put photographs, company logos. So these are all ones I've just added in. These are all text boxes, so I can change them as I want. I can change, but they're all linked to, to specific objects within your schedule. So you don't have to create a new one for each project. You can say, I want this to point to the title. I want this to point to maybe a resource, or, like I said, the author, any filters that are on there, things like that, that will show maybe a baseline, and it will show all of that info. You can save these borders so that you can use them on multiple projects, multiple updates of projects. They're there to use. But like I said, the limits are pretty much whatever you can think of. You can add in objects, pictures, etc. So you can use them. They're great for marketing, for communications, highlighting specific parts of your schedule, and things like that. So I'm going to close out of this print here. I'm going to real quick leave this schedule behind and come into a more defined schedule here. It's bigger, it's a small project, but it's there. So I'm going to show you some highlights here. Once we've got a schedule created, baselined. One thing you can do, I always hated having to scroll through and go from one area of my schedule to the other and having to scroll back and forth. There are a couple different ways that Asta Powerproject helps alleviate the amount of scrolling that we have to do, especially, you get a 10,000, 20,000 activity schedule. That is a lot of either scrolling or, rolling up bars to find where you need to be. Instead, this hierarchy works as a filter. So if I want to look at my finishes, I can click on it, and it will show me just my finishes. Again, it prints what's on the screen. So I don't have to go in and create new filters for every single thing I'm ever going to want to print. I can instead just click on that, hit print, and go back to looking at the full schedule if I want. Along those same lines, I can open new tabs multiple tabs of the same schedule. So right now they look exactly the same. I can tile them, so I can look at them both at the same time. And here, I want to look at substructure. Here, I want to look at my superstructure. So I can see both of them at the same time. I can adjust what I'm seeing. But I can also link between them. So if I want to create some links from one area of the project to another, I can do that. I'm not sure why it is not letting me right now. There we go. I was probably trying to create a loop or something, but I can go from one area of the schedule to the other. Oh, that one warned me of a loop. We'll abandon that. But either way, it's a very easy way to look at multiple areas of your project at the same time. Whether I'm making changes in the spreadsheet or in the bar chart, I can go back and forth, and I don't have to keep scrolling back up and down to look. I can then untile. I can keep them open and go back and forth. When you update something in one, it will update in the other. There's no lag there. It's an instantaneous. Another thing I'm going to jump to here, we're starting to run out of time, so I'm going to speed up a little bit, but we have something called buffer tasks, and it exists, but a lot of people sometimes are like, I don't really know how to use them, so I'm going to give you a couple examples here. The first one I've got is we've got these windows. The first window install task is here, line number 5, and right now we're planning on starting our manufacturing of windows at the end of July. But we know that our window manufacturer, maybe they're get manufactured in China, and we know there's probably going to be shipping and customs issues. We also know that they're swamped in the summertime, so odds are they're not going to build them in the time that they say they're going to build them. So we can put in this task here. You build it like you do any other task, and then you can go to make into and make it a buffer task. So this one here already is a buffer task. And what happens is, this task gets delayed and gets longer and longer, this one just gets shorter. So if you look here, I can add in a column for my float, because I know that while this activity technically right now is scheduled that, my windows are going to be there October 9th, and I don't actually need them till December 8th. So that's, on most schedules would show a 2-month float there for that manufacturing activity. But in reality, we know that odds are there really isn't that much float. And when we print out reports and when we look at our schedule, we don't want to be looking at 20 days or 2 months of float rather. So instead, you can put in this buffer task. And as this task gets longer and longer, buffer task gets shorter. When you get to a point where you eat up all of that buffer, you will get a warning here that says your buffer's consumed, and it turns into just a finish milestone. So apparently this isn't on the critical path. Also, I'm not sure how complete the schedule is, so it's not showing negative float yet, but in theory it would then start showing negative float on that activity. Another way that buffer tasks can be utilized is for things like your weather contingency. Sometimes building in weather days is kind of a weird thing. Some people build in non-work days, certain number per month. Some people put a contingency in that they then decrease. Well, you can easily use a buffer task as your whatever contractually you have for weather days. You can put it in there. It's visual to everybody. Everybody can see as those weather days get eaten up. The weather contingency at task will get shorter. So it's a very open communication way of showing what contingency you have in your schedule. Again, I mentioned before we have unlimited undo and redo, so I can make a bunches of changes and see what's happening. And I can reschedule and say, oh, I really don't like what happened, but I still have this list of undos. Even though I have rescheduled, I have saved, I still can go back and undo any of that. Next, I'm going to get into our comparisons. Got 2 more things to show you here, but for baseline comparison, Asta Powerproject has an unlimited number of P6. Right now you can compare 3 at a time. Right now I actually only have 3, but there's no limit to the number of active baselines that you can have. I can turn on, again in my formatting tab, looking at my baselines. So right now I have 3. I can change the colors of them, but this can be a little busy. That I don't necessarily want to see that. That's a lot to look at. Well, up here I can turn on and off which baselines I want to see. So on the bar chart, so I can say, okay, I want to look at that one. No, I don't really want to look at that one. I want to now look at when we were at the project start. Nope. I want to look at my last update. Because there is a number of baselines, you can baseline every single update so that you can then do your comparisons on the bar chart and on the spreadsheet. Again, in your table definition, you can have this data go to baseline, to one of your baselines, or it can be the live one. So you don't need to find specific columns that reference the baseline. You can just say, I want my start date. I want one regular start date or finish date. This one's going to be live, so that's my current schedule. And I want this finish date to be from the current baseline. So now I have them in there, and I can do that with as many as I want. I can do it with any column that I have in there. I can have it show live data or from a specific baseline. So you can go vice versa. There are columns there available for your different variances for duration or dates, etc. So it's a very fluid way of looking. There are many possibilities for how you want to do your comparisons. You're not limited to very specific sets of data as defined by the software. You can define them how you want. And along that line, the last thing I'm going to show you is that you can create formulas similar to what you would do in Excel. So again, I'm going to go to my table definition here, which is just my more detailed view of these schedules. I can also add and remove columns just by right-clicking. This just gives me more information to define. So here, as you can see, there's formula. I can do a new formula. If I click on that, it will show me a box, and you're going to write a formula very similar to how you would write it in Excel. There also are some drop-downs that you can just insert certain things or fields from your schedule. So I want to insert, my allocation, and it will tie back to that, so you don't have to remember exactly what everything's called. You can just insert it there. I'm going to, just for a quick example, show you some that are already in there. So there are some basics in there, and I have found it helpful to maybe find one that kind of is close to doing what I want, and then you can just go make some tweaks to it and save it as more, so you're not always having to start from scratch. This RAG is a red, amber, green, so we have formulas that can create basically a stoplight to highlight potential issues. So this one is actually showing a duration variance between the baseline that I'm looking at and my live schedule for how the durations have changed. So I'm going to look at this so I can see that, okay, these ones, durations haven't changed. Oh, this one has changed by, I think it was 3 days. If I find any red ones, it would have changed by the 5 days. Again, I'm only looking at part of the schedule. I can go back up and look at all of it. So that's unique. That's a good, if you're creating dashboards or sending this out as, communication tool, it's a quick, easy, oh, it's red, I need to look at that. I can also, I'm going to change that column here to a formula. So, and do, not red, amber, greens, but I can do it in actual costs. So you can do, it can be numbers, it can be float slips, it can be finish date variances between different schedules. Just about anything you can imagine, you can calculate and show here with those formulas. So as you've seen, hopefully I've shown that not only is Asta Powerproject very easy to use, but it also just as powerful as any other scheduling tool on the market. So you don't have to give away power, robustness, features just to get something that's easier to use.
That's
Jim,
terrific. That's terrific.
Questions? Yeah.
So we had a number of different questions. We're kind of running out of time, but there's a couple of things. So one was a question about kind of the cut and paste functionality. In P6, you can import a list of items and put them to help create your schedule. So the cut and paste, what are people using that most commonly for? And do you really see them use it over and over again at different points during the schedule creation?
Yeah, so during the schedule creation, a lot of people do get lists of activities from maybe a subcontractor or a superintendent or somebody, so that gets just creation of activities. It gets used quite a bit. The other place it gets used is for things like your schedule of values. When you're updating, you can maybe, not everybody tracks their costs in the schedule, but they want to, combine their schedule with costs to submit their schedule of values. So if you can create a view that the columns and rows line up with the line items of your schedule of values, and you can copy and paste the costs, into and out of, depending on which way you're doing it, very quickly and easily. So it's your schedule of values, not you having to manually kind of go back and forth between the two files. You can just do a straight copy and paste.
Yeah, the reality is that while we all refer to spreadsheets disparagingly, we talk about how awful they are, we use them for so many things. So you may be provided with resource costs in a table. You may be provided with a list of activities. And the extent to which you could begin to build some of those things into Asta Power Project as, when it comes to a list of activities as what we're calling task pools, or what used to be called fragnets, then you begin to leverage more and more the actual tool. But we live in a world of spreadsheets. People use them all the time. So I'm going to quickly go through a couple of other things that seem to be embedded in a few questions. One of the things that gets lost in the drag and drop, people look at the drag and drop when we're dragging, whether it be different types of assignments, calendar, subcontractors, resources, and think, well, that's kind of pretty. That's nice. That's a nice to have. But what, is that critical? So have you ever made some of those changes in your current scheduling tool and wondered, did I get it right? And did you have to go to, because you don't have a graphical method of displaying that necessarily, have you gone to the spreadsheet and looked for the codes to make sure you've entered them properly? And was that easy? The other thing about this graphical user interface is a lot of people will tell us, a lot of tools are easy to use when you're dealing with a simple project. But when you get 25, 50, 75,000 tasks, it becomes incredibly onerous to navigate, to understand, to communicate, to change, to progress a schedule. If you've ever gotten lost, Megan showed the multiple views, the tabs. If you can begin to carve up pieces of the project into different elements or different portions, phases, by subcontractor, whatever we need to do, it becomes easier to consume, navigate, progress, and update. And that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where we get wider adoption. That's where we get lots of people making use of the actual application. So with that, let me go ahead and switch back over real quick. I think, and we had a few other questions, but because we're running out of time, I want to be mindful and respectful of everybody's time today, and let you know that we've got another webinar coming. We do one every month. We're trying to do them on the last Thursday of the month, so if you want to plug that in your calendar, we'd love for you to. We've been shooting for 11 a.m. Eastern. Seems to get all the different time zones in the morning. If there's a different time that works better for you, or you're hearing from colleagues that we should make some modifications, please let me know. So while we've shown you a lot of features that you won't find in P6 and a lot of reasons why people are migrating to Asta Power Project, or selecting Asta Power Project over P6, many times we'll get questions about how it compares to Microsoft Project. So that's what we'll tackle next month. We'll also be in the fall. We just returned, as I mentioned, from AACE. Get a little break during the summer while you actually get some work done and build some buildings and pave some roads. We'll be at CMAA in San Diego in October, and at the BIM Forum, a whole level of 4D functionality that we weren't even able to cover, that you won't find built into other applications as well. So, and we have webinars on that as well. But we'll be out there in Atlanta in October to address those questions. If you have some additional BIM questions, as I just alluded to, other things, please visit astapowerproject.com. You can find your local Alicosoft partner, and they can help you with all these questions and very specific questions around pricing, what it would look like for me, what training would look like. Send me an email at jim.dawkins@alicosoft, or give us a call on a toll-free number. I really appreciate everybody carving out some time today. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.